First, we will discuss how to combat proliferation financing. The fight against the financing of weapons of mass destruction was integrated into the global efforts to combat financial crime in 2012. Since then, it has become an official objective of the Financial Action Task Force, and the governments worldwide had to undertake action in this area. Prior to that, in 2004, the United Nations had already adopted a broad resolution calling all states to undertake action against the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Even though measures were already being taken to fight proliferation financing, the fight against this form of financial crime was reprioritized by including it into the FATF objectives. There are two important things to note here. The first one is that the United Nations are at the origin of policies combating proliferation financing, and the FATF includes the United Nations efforts under its umbrella. The second is that the United Nations Security Council resolutions are the most important pieces of legislation to take into account when it comes to combating proliferation financing. The United Nations issued a broad resolution calling upon states to take action against proliferation activity in general. Amongst the required measures also figures combating the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. There are more specific resolutions as well that target North Korea and Iran. Although the one on Iran has been eased during the recent years. These resolutions are updated if there is any reason to include new elements regarding specific individuals or designated entities. The resolutions require countries to freeze without delay. This means as soon as someone or some entity is listed, the assets or funds that can be related directly or indirectly to any person or entity listed by the United Nations, or listed by a country on the basis of a UN resolution will be frozen. These sanctions have a worldwide reach and should be integrated into national policy by all UN member states. Now, let's get into what the FATF does in this area. First, as mentioned previously, it has integrated the United Nations resolutions into the FATF guidance on countering proliferation financing. In addition to that, it also issues typologies and reports with regard to proliferation. Thus, it tries to help countries and companies with what they should look at if they want to detect weapons of mass destruction-related activities. FATF makes recommendations how countries or companies can adapt their sanctions screening, their customer identification procedures, red flags, and transaction monitoring systems to reflect the current proliferation risks. In simple words, the detection of proliferation finance must focus on certain listed individuals or designated entities, it must focus on certain states, specific goods, materials and activities related to weapons of mass destruction or with the possibility of a dual use. This can be, for instance, certain chemical substances. These substances can be used for civilian reasons, but also have military purposes, thus a number of them are listed and are under surveillance. Countries may also make a national risk assessment that focuses specifically on proliferation finance. Assessing proliferation financing risk is not only relevant for countries, but also for companies, as it is important to reflect on how you may be affected or can defend yourself against the risk of participating or facilitating proliferation finance. Many businesses and states struggle with the way they should react to these requirements. It is not uncommon that KYC practices or transaction monitoring systems or even risk assessments on a company or country level do not, or not sufficiently, take into account the risk of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. This should progressively change. There is guidance out there not only by the Financial Action Task Force, but also think tanks.